Hi, welcome to Awesome Reversible Knitting. What's so awesome about reversible knitting? First, two right sides are definitely awesome. Second, reversible knitting lays flat and doesn't curl. And third, the structure and texture is awesome, as we'll see today. I have been knitting for about 15 years, and in this video series I'm sharing awesome reversible knitting stitch patterns that I've collected and created. Today we're looking at Dune stitch, sometimes called ridge stitch, horizontal rib stitch, and even welt stitch. In this video, I'll begin by showing you the stitch pattern and how to knit it. Then I'll highlight some characteristics about Dune stitch that make it awesome. And lastly, I'll discuss the resulting fabric, ideas on how to incorporate Dune stitch into your projects, and show some examples of projects that I've made that use Dune stitch. The Dune stitch is a wavy stitch pattern made with a knit row, a purl row, and then a second knit row to create horizontal ridges that alternate sides of the fabric. It's usually written as row 1, knit across, row 2, purl across, row 3, knit across. Let's look at a sample. Notice the 3 rows of stockinette stitch made by the knit purl knit row combination, alternating with reverse stockinette. And of course, it looks the same on both sides. You can keep track of your knitting by looking at the purl bumps. Here you see 2. So the next row is the same as what you see. So since we're knitting from this side, it's a knit stitch. Also notice how the knit-looking stitches hide under the purl-looking rows. Knit stitches sit behind purl stitches when they are stacked. You can see how the stockinette rows cause the fabric to pull in. This is the same reason that many one-sided stitch patterns based on stockinette stitch curl. For the Dune stitch, the natural behavior of the knit and the purl stitches is made use of when the reversible stockinette pulls the fabric back the other way, creating the wave. Overall, the Dune stitch lays flat. A note on the behavior of knit and purl stitches. As I said with the Dune stitch, when stacked, a knit stitch sits behind or under a purl stitch. A knit stitch next to a purl stitch sits in front, like with vertical ribs. Here's a swatch to illustrate. This swatch transitions slowly from horizontal rib to vertical rib. All the sections have the same number of stitches and rows. The horizontal rib sections stretch vertically, and the vertical rib sections stretch horizontally. So what's so awesome about the Dune stitch? First of all, this is a great stitch pattern for beginners, as each row is the same stitch all the way across, and there are twice as many knit across rows as purl across rows. Technically, it's a 1-stitch 6-row repeat, but this stitch is the most basic example of how 3-row repeat patterns are naturally reversible. Second, for more experienced knitters, this stitch pattern is a basis for more complex reversible stitch patterns. By incorporating lace elements or seeding purl stitches, a large variety of beautiful stitch patterns can be created while maintaining the 3-row repeat basis that make it reversible. Here's an example. In this swatch, I have seeded a knit stitch every 3rd stitch on the purl row. You can see the purl bumps on the knit row. You can see how this small change makes a big difference to the texture of the fabric. The horizontal rib is still evident, but the wavy nature of the stitch is much reduced, making it much less stretchy. Here's an example of switching to 1 by 1 rib for 2 of the rows. The remaining full knit row maintains the horizontal rib pattern, while the 1 by 1 rib creates a wonderful texture. I'll be making videos of more 3-row repeat stitch patterns in the future. So what awesome projects can you make with the Dune stitch? When creating a project with the Dune stitch, it's important to take into account the natural vertical stretchiness of the fabric, as I showed. Narrow and wide scarves and cowls maintain the wavy nature of the stitch pattern, which creates an interesting effect. I don't recommend it for any projects that are sensitive to vertical sizing, like vests. Here are some projects I've made using the Dune stitch. I like this funny little Mobius cowl. I knit it from the inside out using a Mobius cast-on, and it sits wonderfully around the neck. And here's an example of the Dune stitch with a very fluffy yarn. I'm not sure I'm convinced. Let me know in the comments. And here is a very light and fluffy infinity scarf. I made this with much larger needles than what is suggested on the ball band. In this case, the stockinette pattern is 5 rows rather than 3. And lastly, here's a section on the oversized sampler scarf that I've shown sections of before and is a feature in my first short. I chose this stitch pattern because it's the middle of the scarf and the supple Dune stitch is very nice on the face. So what's next? I've shown you some examples of how awesome Dune stitch is on its own and as the basis of other stitch patterns. I'll be making videos of more 3-row repeat stitch patterns in the future. For the next video, we'll be looking at the Pharaoh rib stitch, a timeless pattern. I'll be featuring a beautiful royal purple Mobius cowl I made for my friend this winter. So pick up your knitting and create something awesome. I'll do my best to respond to comments, and I'd love to hear about your favorite reversible knitting pattern. Also feel free to subscribe to my channel for more awesome reversible knitting. For those of you still here, the last few years I've been working hard to find simple ways to feel better, what I call my daily well-being practice. This is not medical advice, I'm just sharing what works for me. Today's well-being practice is breathing, specifically breathing through your nose, often called nasal breathing. It seems that our anatomy works much better when we breathe through our nose rather than through our mouth. Not only is air warmed and filtered before it goes into our lungs, but our tongue pressing on the roof of our mouth and the upper teeth has advantages. As children grow, nasal breathing is essential for proper mouth development. Also, I have noticed now that I have been consciously breathing through my nose as much as possible that I am much less congested. Many medical practitioners have whole videos on this. If you need more info, they are easy to find. Have a great day.